Hello friends, this is a lecture on Economic Survey Volume 2, Chapter 5, Inflation. In our earlier theory lectures, we have seen basics of inflation in Part 1. We have seen inflation indices WPI, CPI, IIP and PPI in Part 2. And we have also seen impact of inflation, inflation trend and monetary policy in Part 3. In this lecture, we are going to see what are the observations of Economic Survey regarding inflation. Now we have covered the basics of inflation in our previous theory lectures, but for the purpose of this lecture, let's revise it again. Now we know that this basket represents items of your essential need, and the rate at which the prices of items in this basket will increase is inflation. And why that will happen? Because of two reasons. Either the demand will exceed supply, in that case there will be a demand-supply mismatch and the prices will increase. That will be demand pull inflation. Or the prices of inputs that go into the manufacturing of these products will increase. So naturally the prices of the end products will increase. That will be cost push inflation. Okay. Now let's come to consumer price index. Now we know that this basket represents items of your essential needs. Let's see what the basket actually contains. This is the Cpi Index released by Central Statistics Office for the month of December 2019. The items listed here are cereals and products, meat and fish, egg, milk and products, oils and fats, fruits, vegetables, pulses and products, sugar, spices, etc. So as you can see, these are the items of your essential needs. So when we consider an increase in the prices of these items, we say that there is CPI inflation. Okay, so what consumer price index do? It tracks the change in retail prices of the essential goods and services consumed by households, that is us, the consumer. Okay, now for different consumers, the essential needs may differ. So naturally, this basket is different for different consumers. So we have three CPI numbers representative of three baskets. We have CPI number for industrial workers, we have CPI numbers for agricultural laborers, and we have CPI number for rural laborers. All these three CPI numbers are given by Labor Bureau. The base year for CPI IW is 2001. The base year for CPI AL, agricultural labor, is 1986-87, and the base year for CPI RL, rural labor, is 1986-87 again. All these numbers are given by the Labor Bureau. Now we also used to have a CPI for urban non-manual employees, but we have now abolished that. Along with these three CPI numbers, there is an All India Consumer Price Index. This is the format in which CSO releases CPI. This All India Consumer Price Index is given by Central Statistics Organization. The base year for it is 2012, and the data to compile this index, All India Consumer Price Index, is given by Consumer Expenditure Survey and National Sample Survey. Okay. Now, along with Consumer Price Index, that is All India Consumer Price Index, there is also a Consumer Food Price Index. And what it does, it specifically measures the rate of change in prices of food products, and this helps in targeting food inflation. This Consumer Food Price Index is also given by CSO, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. And the base year for CFPI, that is Consumer Food Price Index, is also 2012. Okay, now like there is a Consumer Food Price Index, there is at global level a similar food price index which is given by FAO, the FAO Food Price Index. FAO is the Food and Agriculture Organization. The FAO Food Price basket contains cereal, vegetable, oil, dairy, meat and sugar. And FAO also releases this index on a monthly basis. These are the items listed in our food price index. Then we come to wholesale price index. What we have seen in CPI tracks the change in prices of items in the basket after the consumer have spent the money on it. But what WPI does? WPI tracks the prices of goods sold and traded in bulk at business to business level, and the consumer is not involved at this stage. So WPI tracks inflation at the initial stages at the transaction, whereas CPI tracks inflation after the consumer has spent money on the final product. So this was a basic difference between WPI and CPI. Now we see Wholesale Price Index. Wholesale Price Index is given by Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, and CPI was given by CSO. The base year for WPI is 2011-12. The base year for CPI is 2011-12. Now, the current base year for WPI is 2011 and 12. Earlier was 2004-5. There was a working group under the chairmanship of Dr. Soumitra Chaudhary. He was ex-member of erstwhile Planning Commission, and he suggested that the base year for WPI should be revised from 2004-5 to 2011-12. And this was 7th in the series of revision for the base year for WPI. Now, what are the features of new WPI with new base year? The items has been increased from 676 to 697. And as there is a CPI food price index, now there is also a WPI food index, which is given by CSO. Now please remember that WPI is given by Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, but the WPI food index is given by CSO. Now let's see the weights in WPI. In WPI, primary articles have 23% weight, fuel and power have 13% weight, and manufactured product have 64% weight. So manufactured product have the highest weight in WPI. Now this table shows the difference in weight between the earlier base year, that is 2004-5 of WPI, and the current base year of WPI, that is 2011 and 12. You can see here that the weight for primary article has increased from 20.12 to 22.62, and this is a significant increase of 2.5%. The weight for fuel and power has been decreased from 14.91 to 13.15. And the weight for manufactured products is more or less the same. Let's take an easy question. With the latest revision in WPI series of index, which of the following is true? Weight of primary articles is increased. Yes, it has increased. Weight of manufactured product has increased. We have seen that it is more or less the same. And weight of fuel and power is decreased. So yes, it has decreased. 1 and 3 is the answer. Let's take another easy question. Which of the following has highest weight in WPI basket? We know that it is manufactured products. It has highest weight in the WPI basket, that is 64%. This was all about our last lecture, theory lectures on WPI, CPI and inflation. Now let's come to what are the observations of economic survey on inflation. What economic survey has observed that at global level, inflation is declining. Also, inflation is declining in almost all countries in the world, and also in emerging market economies, inflation is declining. This is what economic survey observes. And what are the reasons for that? Most countries have adopted a monetary policy framework. Most countries have also adopted labor and other reforms, and most countries are moving towards directly inflation targeting. So India has also introduced inflation targeting in 2016 after Urjit Patel Committee recommendations, and we want inflation to be in the range of 4 plus minus 2. Okay. Now the first country to target inflation was New Zealand, and later Canada and UK followed. Right now, recently, India, Kazakhstan and Russia are targeting inflation. Now we come to what has been the inflation trend in India. Survey says that inflation is moderating since 2014. Okay. So as you can see in this table, WPI inflation increased between 2015 and 2019. This is graphically represented here. WPI inflation has been decreasing, but in after 2019, December 2019, it has seen an increase. Okay. Similarly, WPI food index shows inflation declined from 2017 to 2019, but after 2019, the food inflation has also increased. And similar is the case with CPI. CPI combined shows that CPI inflation increased from 3.7% to now, after December 2019, it is 4.1%. Another interesting observation that survey makes is generally CPI rural inflation is more than CPI urban inflation. But lately, what is happening is CPI urban inflation has been consistently above CPI rural inflation. And what are the reasons for that? Urban areas have registered higher food inflation. Food inflation is the contributor. It's about inflation in states. It makes some observations like uh, in some states inflation has increased. Inflation has increased, whereas in other states inflation has decreased. So there is a variation in CPI inflation. In almost 19 states, inflation was lower than the all India average. Daman and Diu witnessed the lowest inflation, followed by Bihar and Chhattisgarh. And overall inflation in rural areas is lower than all India average. So these are the economic survey regarding inflation in states. As you can see in this graph, inflation is variable across the states. In some states it has decreased, whereas in other states it has increased. Let's take an easy question. Consider the following with respect to recent trend in inflation. CPI inflation uniformly decreased in most states? No, we have seen that in states it has increased and in other states it has decreased. CPI rural inflation has been above CPI urban inflation? So no, we have seen that CPI urban inflation is above CPI rural inflation. So which of the following are correct? None of them are correct. Then let's look at what are the drivers of inflation. So in 2019-20 survey observed that food and beverages component among these items, food and beverages component contributed the highest to the inflation, almost 54%. Second largest contributor was miscellaneous growth. See, in this graph, food and beverages component has increased in 2019-20 compared to 2018-19. Now, we know that food inflation has been the contributor to inflation, biggest contributor to inflation. So, survey has listed 3 commodities which contributed to food inflation. According to economic survey, the commodities responsible for food inflation were 3: onion, tomatoes, and pulses. Let's see the reasons for the rise in prices of onions. Generally, we see a rise in prices of onions because of demand-supply mismatch. The the supply of onion was affected due to heavy rains in September-October 2019, which caused damage to kharif crops. The highest damage was reported from Madhya Pradesh. Also, rains in Maharashtra delayed the market arrival of onions. So all these supply constraints raised the prices of onions. In case of tomatoes, Maharashtra and Karnataka are the major suppliers of tomatoes. So excess rains in these regions disrupted the supply of tomatoes, causing demand-supply mismatch, and the prices of tomatoes increased. Let's take a very easy question. Which of the following is a major driver of inflation in the year 2019-20? Fuel and light, miscellaneous group, food and beverages, and housing. We have seen that it is food and beverages. We have seen in this graph that it is food and beverages which was the highest contributor to inflation. Okay, now we have seen that there were 3 commodities which contributed to inflation: onion, tomatoes, and pulses. We have seen the reasons for rise in prices of onions and tomatoes, but the case of pulses is different and special because economic survey has pointed out a cobweb phenomenon in case of pulses. So we will see that in the next lecture. Also, we'll see what is the correlation coefficient. We'll see price volatility. We'll see measures taken to moderate the price volatility in case of onion prices. We'll see headline and core inflation, and we'll also see trend in global commodity prices. So this was all about the economic survey part 1 of economic survey chapter 5. Next lecture we'll see part 2 and we'll see all these topics listed here. And thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful. Thank you very much.